Hi, I'm Rick Jansen, and this is my fly tying channel. You know, one of the most exciting hatches of the year that you can encounter while on the water is the caddis or sedge hatch. That's because if you discover it early, you can have a prolonged day of successful fishing, starting with the pupa, working through to the emergers, and then finally the adults, watching those big trout come up to the surface to gulp down your dry fly. This video is going to start a mini-series on the caddis, and we're going to look at the various flies we use to imitate those different phases. Today's episode, my favorite caddis pupa pattern. Hello there, welcome to my fly bench. You know, caddis pupa patterns have been around for a very long time, and that's because they've proven to be extremely effective at catching trout. Many different materials have gone into their construction, many of which have proven their staying power. In today's episode, we're going to look at a fusion of the old and new. Let's look at the materials you're going to need to tie this fly. Into my vise I have placed a number 8 2x long mustad hook. To that I have attached my 70 denier light olive tying thread. I'm just securing that in the middle. Our first order of business is to attach our lead wire, and there's two reasons that we put this on there. One is to help sink the fly down to the fish zone very quickly. It's especially important in rivers, but can even be very helpful in still waters. And the second is to build up a bit of width in our abdomen area here of the fly. The abdominal area is quite a bit chubby looking, chunky looking, and in a caddis pupa, and we want to represent that. And so the lead wire does that more quickly than we would with just our underbody. Okay, so we're going to bring our thread back there to the rear of the lead, and then secure that end of it down, build up a ramp there and snap our wire off very nicely. Build up our ramp, then I bring my thread forward to the front of the thread again, build a ramp there, and then back. We want to make sure that lead is well secured and isn't going to slide around on the hook shank. So bringing our thread back to the opposite the barb of the hook, our tail material is Semperfli superfine dubbing. And the key feature with this dubbing is that it's long fiber dubbing. There's long fiber and short fiber dubbing. They each have their uses, but for this particular use on the tail here, I want a long fiber dubbing. You'll see why we do that. So I pull off a good length of it there, and you can tell it's long fiber dubbing because when you pull it out, it has long fibers. The short fiber dubbing, you'd only have what's in your fingers. It wouldn't stick out there. So we are going to attach that as a tail. And it won't stay as a tail. The caddis pupa don't have a tail. But this will come in very handy for our overbody. That's what it becomes. Our underbody is Semperfli's straggle string in dark green. And I'm using, you can see the glitter in that stuff and how it shines and pops in the light. The caddis pupa, as it ascends to the surface, builds up these gaseous bubbles under the pupal skin, which help it make its ascent, in addition to the swimmerets it uses to try to climb to the water surface, to rise. And it's an important feature, those gaseous bubbles, and we want to represent that, but they're somewhat veiled. They're not as bright as this straggle string would be, but that's what the dubbing tail is for. We'll see how we use that to subdue the brightness of this straggle string. So we're going to wrap that straggle string forward and build up our abdomen there over the lead. And we'll build it up to about the 2/3 up the hook shank here. We want the abdomen to be quite prominent. It is longer than the thorax and it needs to appear that way. So I'll keep wrapping, especially at the front end, to try to build up some volume, and then we'll tie it off here about 2/3 up the hook shank. Give it a wrap or two in front and cut off our tag end. And this is where our tail of dubbing comes in, our long fibers, is we create a veil. We separate this into a number of different plies that we surround the straggle string with, under, both sides, and over top. We want to, and this is a bit fussy, we want to pull that over, and there we go. We've got a nice veil disguising that straggle string and creating also the swollen looking pupil body there, pupil abdomen. Tie that off, pull up our tag ends, and cut off the tag end there. And we've got a really nice look there. That light will shine through there and sparkle off that straggle string underneath, giving the impressions of the gases that are there under there. Our thorax is going to be hare's ear dubbing in, and this is now our short fiber dubbing. It's very straggly and very buggy looking, and it's darker than the abdomen, so that's what we're going to use here. In aid of that, we're using some dubbing wax. This is a very old tin. I've had it for over 30 years, but they still make it. I found it on Togen's website. They still have dubbing wax. So in order to use that, what I do is I just rub my forefinger, the tip of it, in the dubbing wax, and my thumb. Rub them together and then rub it onto the thread, back and forth, up and down the thread, to create a sticky surface. I then pinch a small piece of dubbing and spin it or twist it onto the thread with my sticky fingers. And we'll do that and we start to build up a dubbing noodle. Now you want to just spin in one direction. Lord help the guy who tries to go in two directions. All you do is keep undoing what you just did. So pick a direction and stick with it and spin that on there till you've got enough to cover that front third of the hook. I always do a little too much. I just strip off the extra when I've got enough on there that I think I've covered the essential parts. Okay, now we've got our dubbing noodle formed, and we will wrap that up there and build up a bit of a bulky thorax. And this dubbing is great, as all of those straggles can give the impression of legs. And now I've got a little too much, so I'll strip that off, which is just fine. And we'll go in front of the dubbing now. And our final item is we wrap a hackle with partridge. And there's two reasons I'm using partridge. I'll grab a feather off the cape here and describe to you why I'm using partridge, why I made that choice. One is that you'll notice that the partridge fibers are very close in color to the hare's ear dubbing we just put on there. The other is that they're very soft, flowing feather fibers, and I want them to move in the water like the swimmerets of our caddis pupa. So you'll notice there's a lot of fuzzy, fluffy, almost marabou-like material down there on the shaft, and we'll strip that off carefully, and we'll work the other side of the feather and strip off the fluffy fibers below there. Okay, now we take our main stem here and we tie it in. I like to tie it in with the concave side down toward the fly and the convex side up. So we'll just give that a couple of wraps behind the eye. Make sure it's well secured and cut off the shaft of the feather in front here, the tag end. Now using our hackle pliers, we're going to give that just a turn and a half. We don't want too many legs, so we grab the tip of that feather, there's a half a turn, and then one, and we come down underneath. Now in order to secure that without trapping too many of those fibers under our thread, I simply take my hackle pliers, which are now behind the thread, and I'll go once around. I'll go counterclockwise around the thread, like that, then wrap the thread over the hook. Then I do that 3 times. Once around, over the hook. Once around, Oh, came out of the pliers, finished that round over the hook. Now I've got 3 tie-ins there. I can nip off the tip end of that feather without cutting my thread, because I really hate that when that happens. And then I'll slightly moisten the fingers of my left hand and pull back all those fibers and make a nice conical head here. We're going to secure everything in place with a nice tidy head. We'll give that thread now a touch of brushable super glue. Just enough to cement that head in place. And a whip finish will complete our fly. I will tie this fly as small as number 12, this particular pattern. That's the smallest I would go with this pattern. If this caddis were smaller than that, I have other patterns for that. And as big as number 6. But 8 and 10 are the most frequently used sizes in my fly box. That straggle string is a great material for showing those sparkles through that thin veil of dubbing, and the dubbing gives it that delicate, soft, juicy body that the trout so eagerly desire when these things are rising through the water column. The soft partridge feathers will flow and swim nicely, creating the impression of those swim rats. Tight lines out there, everybody. Good luck, and thanks you for watching.